When I first read Wei Wu Wei's Open Secret, to say the least, it was rather startling because you're going along in life thinking you're having the life you're having, and you're enduring all kinds of suffering and all kinds of problems and difficulties. And the point is, it all seems very real. And of course, as a psychologist, I was working with people whose problems seemed very real. So when I ran into his book, he said, look, would you be willing to consider that what's really true is that everything happening is taking place as content in a dream? Well, I mean, initially I thought, this is curiously interesting, but the guy sounds, quite frankly, out of his gourd. But the more I read him, the faster I made a connection between what he was saying and some of the problems I was encountering with clients in my practice. Perhaps the most startling thing that was ambiguous and paradoxical, always in practice, was that you could show a client, 10 different ways to reduce suffering and to solve problems, and you would get this strong kickback feeling that they didn't like what they were hearing, and that while they hated their suffering, what they hated was intervention or disruption of their style of suffering even more. There was no way that my own amnesia would allow me to bring that into focus, to really identify that in the dream, suffering plays the dominant role of sustaining the idea we are the not okay person we're busy portraying in the dream. There was no way that I could know that. My own amnesia wouldn't allow me to see that. But when I read his book, it hit me like a thunderbolt. And instead of criticizing him or saying the guy's really nuts, I thought, what if I pretend that what he's saying is true and just explore it from that perspective? And that's exactly what I did. And the more I read his books, all 8 of them, and the more my own amnesia subsided so that I was allowed to really understand what he was trying to convey, it became increasingly clear that this was the fundamental premise for Buddhism. And that while some Buddhists argue for the relative, that the dreamer in the dream is also sort of sometimes kind of like a person, that the majority consensus was that in fact this is some kind of an illusion. Later on, Wei Wu Wei even made it quite clear that there's no one to know this is an illusion, so it can't be one, because only dreamers posing as people could call it an illusion. That's pretty funny when you think about it. But what I did do is I began to take everything he said and realize that I could deconstruct it and then synthesize it into a way of working with dreamers. It was the beginning of the end of working with people, which was what I had done for the last 35 years. I was willing to assume that what he was saying, that it could be true, and that what you really need to do is work with how the dreamer in the dream uses suffering to support the fiction. It is some kind of a not okay person. And that was sort of the beginning of assembling a way of working with dreamers, which I then called the recovery process. In this installment today, I share with you some of the ways, some of the concepts, and some of the language that we can shift to begin to understand that really what life's all about is that it is a dream going on. It is being dreamed apparently by something we can refer to as mind, although historically it has been given many different names. And that while this idea may sound impossible, and your own amnesia may want to kick it out real quick as too threatening to even consider, I would ask you to consider that if it's true that suffering is what we use in the dream to sustain the fiction we are the people we portray, then it would give you a fresh perspective to understand suffering as a huge concept that really dominates reality. And I'm talking all the way from marriage conflicts, relationship conflicts, all kinds of social conflicts, all the way up to and including the endless perpetuation of war as maximum suffering. You know, even if he's not right, and even if Buddhism is way off the mark, it can't hurt anyone to consider these ideas as potentially valid. And I would encourage you to play with these ideas from a perspective of curiosity. And if you can do that, you may find that there's a whole lot of what he's saying, and that is included in what I refer to as the recovery process, that both has insight, has impact, has substance. And ultimately, if this is a parody going on, a mind-generated parody, then it's the beginning of shifting from seriousness to humor. And you begin to find out that the shift also allows you to understand everyone around you as a dreamer whose suffering is what they depend on, literally, to sustain the fiction they are some kind of a not okay person. You can't really understand others until you understand your own paradigm. In other words, what you're doing here in the dream. And when that comes into focus, everything else starts to come into focus. And it comes piecemeal, trippingly, as it were, one thing at a time, until finally the big picture shows up and you begin to think, oh my gosh, there is a different view of reality than the one we're stuck in. And you begin to see that the view of reality we're stuck in is really what we're stuck in is what we use to dismiss truth. So that this whole drama is a struggle between dismissing truth and reconnecting with truth. And this article today really sets the stage for the beginning of looking at that in depth. Hope you enjoy it. See you next time.